All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm very excited today because I have a special guest, Dr. Harold Shinitzky. Hi, Harold.
Hey, good morning to you.
And today we are going to be talking about narcissism, which is a hot topic. But Dr. Shinitzky, you just wrote a book called Me, Myself, and I, a Narcissist Mindset. And I was so excited when you told me you were writing this book to have you on the show, but to read it. So thanks for agreeing to be here.
My pleasure. It is an honor to be here and to share this information with your listeners.
Yes. A little background, you've written a few books, and
Mhm.
another one that I really enjoyed was A Champion's Mindset. So
Thank you. Thank you. That is my specialty in sports psych.
yes, yes. So let's talk a little bit about your book. I was
Mhm.
first curious. I wanted to ask you what made you decide to write this one?
Good question. Over the last several years, I've found that a lot more individuals presenting to my practice who have come out of very destructive relationships.
Hmm.
Pretty significant individuals that they were with, that they were in love, that had a marriage and a family, who were actively willing to destroy their lives, their reputations. It was really impressive to see people talk about, if I can't have you, no one can. To
Hmm.
try to funnel and siphon off the funds from the family, which would affect the children too.
Hmm.
Um, just a myriad of these types of very abusive relationships. And
Hmm.
so that was the main impetus to be able to share this information with the public, since my background was in or is in prevention. The idea is
Hmm.
to get the information out to the public as best and as early as possible. Additionally, I've just noticed that there's a lot of people who are in positions of power in society who
Hmm.
are role modeling this kind of ugliness, this
Hmm.
lack of regard for other individuals, a lack of civility.
Hmm.
And that seems to be emulated by a lot of the young adults that I work with who see it as normal. And so they now are behaving in this inappropriate, offensive manner. So
Hmm.
because of those, I decided let's put the information together, talk
Hmm.
about what different types of narcissists are out there, what
Hmm.
characteristics there are, and then in more particular, what a victim or a survivor of this type of a narcissist relationship can do to help build their own self-worth, to be
Hmm.
able to kind of progress and heal through that so they can have a better future.
Hmm. It's great. I love how the book, just what you said, the format of it, it's here's what narcissism is and the different kinds. And then also kind of like the part two of the book is, identifying how to help yourself and,
Mhm.
how to recover if you have been in a relationship where narcissism was present. But
Yes.
before we get into that, you just said something that I'm curious about.
Mhm.
Um, the leaders, people who are kind of out there displaying symptoms of narcissism.
Yes.
Do you think that the age of social media has really, I don't know, increased the awareness of narcissism, or in some ways
Uh,
have like made more narcissism present?
Really interesting dynamic question. I
Hmm.
would say the internet has contributed to that. Back in the 90s, way
Hmm.
back in the day, um, there was a very common video or type of video that was going around when the internet was kind of in its infancy, and that was
Hmm.
videotaping young, like teenagers fighting. And I
Hmm.
remember just thinking at that time, oh, this is feeding into the narcissism of the species. Look at me. See
Hmm.
how important or how big I am. And I thought, that's not really good.
Hmm.
So, over the last several decades, I do believe it has influenced that somehow I am this important. Notice me, look at me, it's all about me.
Hmm.
In addition, I think what you're also pointing out is in society, it's kind of trendy now to label someone a
Hmm.
narcissist without
Yes.
necessarily the commensurate criteria to equal the diagnosis. It's kind of a
Hmm.
phrase people use when they don't like how someone's behaving, or if they just, it could be one thing. Oh, hey, there are jerks out there. If you're a jerk
Hmm.
out there, stop being a jerk.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you're a narcissist. So let me put it this way: if you break it down to the core, narcissists are jerks,
Okay.
but not all jerks are narcissists.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I like that simplistic version or definition. But it also has me thinking, even a question I often get is a version of this. Either one is everyone I'm going to date a narcissist?
Mhm.
Or the ex, my ex is now a narcissist all of a sudden. I hear that a lot. And I think and not everyone, like you said, not everyone is a narcissist, but there are traits of narcissism that people can display.
If we want to just kind of move along the continuum, first off,
Mhm.
it's like if you think of any psychiatric diagnosis, there's on one end, not a big deal, to wow, that's the diagnosis.
Mhm.
And so people can have aspects of or traits of narcissism without necessarily qualifying for the diagnosis of
Mhm.
narcissism. Um, and if I can just kind of say to everyone who's listening, everything you think, feel, say, and do makes sense to you. You
Right.
see the world from your point of view. Therefore, there's a part of all of us that is narcissistic. We
Mhm.
interpret the world from our own point of view. And since it makes sense to us, it's hard to believe other people have different points of view.
Mhm.
And that's a challenge for us as a species. To be able to coexist is a main factor for creating a civilization.
Mhm.
And so we want to be able to rise to the highest level that we all can, which is to know that I have my own points of view, but I exist in a world, in systems, in society that have other points of view. It doesn't make
Mhm.
mine right and theirs wrong. It doesn't make theirs right and mine wrong. We
Mhm.
used to have civility where you could talk about differences. Now we've gotten into this kind of the tribal, you're either
Mhm.
with us or you're the enemy.
Mhm.
And that's more of a cultural grotesquerie that we have created. Um,
Mhm.
it sounds nice for whoever you're with, and it's horrible to the other people that you're just have a difference of opinion on.
Right.
So those characteristics you want to know about?
Yes. Mhm.
Ah, ah. So there's a bunch of them, and you need to satisfy at least 5 of these.
So this is
Um,
to be diagnosed with narcissism.
yes,
Mhm.
the American Psychological Association. We look at something called the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and there are criteria. So the first thing that we oftentimes look at is the idea of grandiosity. These
Mhm.
individuals have a grandiose, what we lovingly refer to in society as big-headed ego,
Mhm.
a grandiose sense of self, oftentimes without the equal commensurate achievements. It's
Mhm.
really interesting when you listen to them. They're kind of braggadocious about it, a bit of pompous towards what they're saying. And as you move through the list, the others that are important, also there's this tendency of having a preoccupation with this ideal kind of power or beauty or love.
Mhm.
They have a sense of being special, that not only are they special, but they should only associate with other special people. And only
Mhm.
special people really understand them. Everyone else who doesn't quite get them isn't as unique or special as they are. So they
Mhm.
only want to associate with those individuals. Um, when they're amongst others, they have a need for excessive admiration,
Mhm.
absolute loyalty. It actually reveals how thin skinned most of these grandiose narcissists are. They can't even have a difference of opinion.
Mhm.
They begin to attack. That's why they need absolute loyalty. They don't really have much foundation, and so they need absolute admiration and affection to keep someone near and dear to them. Otherwise, they just trash them.
Mhm.
Um, the sense of like entitlement, rules don't apply to me, laws don't apply to me, mores don't apply to me. I need absolute compliance from everybody. Addition to that, these individuals, and this gets more into the kind of the disturbed side, they can
Mhm.
be very exploitative. Relationships are not seen as relationships. People are not seen as people.
Mhm.
They are just perceived as a means to their end. So if a narcissist says, I can do this for you,
Mhm.
they're trying to exploit you for something that they're getting. If they're not
Mhm.
getting whatever that is from you, or if they no longer need it, they will dump you like yesterday's news. Every relationship is transactional. They never do
Mhm.
something for you unless they're getting something from it. They
Right.
lack empathy.
Mhm.
They don't recognize other people have feelings. So if they hurt you, and if they're willing to admit, my bad, I'm sorry, they immediately want you to get over it. Why are
Mhm.
you bringing that up? Why are you still, you're just always trying to make this negative. They have no regard for how their behavior affected you.
Mhm.
They live in a world of envy. They believe everyone's envious of them, but in
Mhm.
reality, they're actually the one who's incredibly envious. And then the last one is that they talk about this attitude of arrogance and haughty behavior, kind of like they carry around an attitude of better than. And those are the criteria that you oftentimes will see for individuals who have the characteristics of narcissism.
Mhm. Mhm. It's so interesting because I know that I've read somewhere underneath narcissism is a deep insecurity
Yes.
and then this lack of empathy. And so when I talk to someone about who's been in a narcissistic relationship, the part that they have a hard time letting go of is the honeymoon phases
Yes.
that they perceived as real, and it was real for them, but
Sure.
just that that's not that's not real. It's transactional
Mhm.
to the narcissist. It's like they were getting something from that as well.
Yes, the beginning part of a lot of these relationships, because the narcissist is always looking for what can I get from this.
Mm-hmm.
They are sharks swimming in society who are
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes looking for individuals' needs. They're very seductive to the object of their desire. They do this thing
Mm-hmm.
that's commonly referred to as love bombing. So,
Yes.
what is it you need? I'll provide it for you. I
Mm-hmm.
will win you over just so I can get what I need. So
Mm-hmm.
to the recipient, it feels like I've hit the jackpot. I've got this individual who's totally invested in me. My gosh, thoughtful, considerate, kind, taking care of me, showing me the world, whatever it might be, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
You have your needs, and the recipient, I would say, has grown in a world of morals. So
Mm-hmm.
they look at behaviors as by themselves, either good or bad, right or wrong, and that's how they make their decisions.
Mm-hmm.
The narcissist doesn't look at the world from morals, in terms of moral development, I should say. They look at it from what's called consequence driven morality.
Mm-hmm.
What are the odds I'm going to get caught doing whatever it is I'm doing? And are the consequences great enough I should even care? You
Right.
might see like oppositional defiant disorder kids doing this. But as adults, they're going to be doing things for themselves behind the scenes. And as a loving individual, you're believing, well, everyone should behave this way
Mm-hmm.
because it makes sense to me.
Right.
Meanwhile, this other creature,
Mm-hmm.
this narcissist, this other branch of our development, doesn't look at relationships that way. So,
Mm-hmm.
this kind hearted, thoughtful, loving individual who wants a relationship and believes that's what you do, you work in a relationship, is stunned when this person just turns cold and mean and
Mm-hmm.
abusive. And we have to, the the victim has to learn that not everyone lives by your morals. As a matter of
Mm-hmm.
fact, there are some individuals who have very different standards, and
Mm-hmm.
theirs is a statement of them, yours is a statement of you. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you miss that loving sense, the honeymoon phase, that's
Mm-hmm.
a lovely statement of you, but it has
Right.
nothing to do with the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so as you move forward in life, you have to understand this is still a good statement of you.
Right. That and to jump for a second,
Mhm.
that you kind of get into that also in the healing part, like
Yeah.
step two or part two of the book of just understanding yourself, and you do talk a little bit about codependency, and I think
Yes.
that is important. But to go back in the book, you mentioned three different kinds of narcissism. Would you like to just give kind of a brief
Which ones
description
would
of
you
the
like to
three?
hear about?
Well, the covert, overt, and then the malignant.
Yeah. Well, in society, you don't need a doctorate to diagnose someone who is an overt narcissist.
Right.
An overt narcissist is a social bully. They are offensive and rude, disrespectful, belittling, derogatory, trivializing, whatever you want to say. They cannot help themselves. This is all they do. This is how they exist. Even if you are encouraging them, hey, can you slow that down? Can I roll it back just a little bit? For a very short while, but they actually look very uncomfortable because they're thinking it, and their nonverbal communications coming across like, oh, I could really offend you right now. So they are mean-spirited, hurtful, abusive, and this is where then the individuals that they associate with, there might be mutual exploitative. So I'm willing to accept someone who's a horrible human being as long as I'm getting something out of it.
Right.
And you see that all over the place in society and in relationships. As long as I'm getting something from this, I can minimize the horrible nature of this overt narcissist. The covert narcissist, that is a wolf in sheep's clothing. That is someone who is pretty slimy. They are manipulative, exploitative in public. They will put on this charade, this facade, having a persona like, hey, you need some help financial? I'll take care of you over there. Hey, you need some networking? I got that for you. It's when they go into that intimate relationship back home that they slip into eventually this judgmental, rude, belittling. I had this one individual who was just horrible to his wife. And he would say things like, oh, you're getting fat and ugly. It's only me that actually would be willing to put up with you. And it was just like very hurtful statements. They had 3 kids. He'd come home from work and there'd be like toys on the ground. And he would be like, listen, I can do my job and your job. You are pathetic. And when they finally came in for therapy, he never admitted fault. He just explained the justification, which is what he would do when he was at home. And it was just this ugliness. Covert narcissists will give you the silent treatment. They will use sex and the removal of it as a form of power and control. They get power from knowing that they can destroy someone emotionally, put them in a negative position. If they ever talk about vulnerabilities, and not just theirs, but yours, they will bring those up at a later time. They don't fight fair, and it's really ugly in a relationship. And then malignant narcissists, probably the most grotesque. I'm sorry, go for it.
Real quick, if you don't mind, because as you're talking, I'm hearing, I'm hearing some things that I see often with couples. And part of how I explain it when we're not talking about narcissism, but just these dynamics, Dr. Gottman's the 4 horsemen: criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling, the loss of respect. And so to go back to something you said earlier, not everyone who's a jerk is a narcissist, but I do want to point out 2 things in these relationships that you're describing. When there is, would it be fair to say most or all narcissists, whether they're overt, covert, or malignant, there is no respect and no remorse?
They do not admit fault. They never want to be held accountable. They would rather have an argument with no solution rather than a dialogue to come to some resolution. Their inferiority prevents them from admitting that they were wrong. And so they are not going to be, they're certainly not going to present the therapy. The only reason a narcissist presents the therapy is if their loved one puts them in a compromising position that says, fish or cut bait, we're going to go in or not. And that's not insight-oriented change for the narcissist. That's consequence-driven morality. I'm going to only do it to prevent the consequence. And then the other one is if they experience a massive assault to their ego. And what you and I and what the regular individuals listen out there in YouTube land are hearing this
Mm-hmm.
If someone said to you, oh, like, you disappointed me. You said you'd be here at 7. I had everything put together. You show up at almost at 8. You didn't even give me a call. It's like, oh, I'm really sorry. My bad. I apologize. I won't let that
Mm-hmm.
happen again. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
That does not come from the narcissist. Their assault to their ego must be massive.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we would think is, well, that should be enough for the person to kind of change their ways. Not even close.
Right.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
no, they won't admit, so they won't be able to come to some resolution.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this, notion of, like, if I'm talking to couples, the four horsemen, the negative four horsemen, the antidotes, more often, it's like, okay, how can I apply the antidotes to change the behavior and to create, harmony and peace or whatever.
Yes.
When a narcissist is present, that typically it's, oh, it's that justification of why they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to do the antidotes.
Yep. And they
And then,
also turn it on the
yes.
other person, which
Mm-hmm.
I may be jumping ahead right now,
Nope, that's
but
okay. Mm-hmm.
there's a tactical skill
Mm-hmm.
that these 3 different narcissists, and we'll hit on malignant in a bit, but they do this thing called gaslighting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever get the chance to see the old movie from the bygone eras called Gaslight, and it really kind of walks people through this idea of, I am going to make you challenge and question your own perception of reality. You observe something about me, I
Mm-hmm.
deny it, I blame you, and it's all your point of view, and it's only because of you that it's an issue anyways.
Right.
It's constantly reflecting it back on them,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a crazy making strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the person who's trying to make a relationship work is like, well, okay, maybe I'm looking at it wrong.
Right.
It's like, okay, I get it. In a loving relationship, that's great. It's part of
Mm-hmm.
mutuality. But
Mm-hmm.
in this type of relationship, the accusations, the lies, the deception are all
Mm-hmm.
thrusted upon the observer, the loving, the moralistic individual who
Mm-hmm.
is trying to come up with the antidotes to be able to make this relationship work. And that has nothing to do with the gaslighting approach, where it's
Right.
always externalized,
Mm-hmm.
projected out, and negated and denied.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for that. So let's go back to malignant.
Malignant, the most grotesque of all of the different diagnoses for narcissism. The
Mm-hmm.
malignant narcissist is almost moving towards sociopathy.
Mm-hmm.
They are cruel individuals. They can be filled with vengeance
Mm-hmm.
within them. It goes to the idea that if I can't have you, no one can.
Mm-hmm.
And that causes great concern, because when you look at dictators around the world currently and historically, they can be incredibly ugly to such a
Mm-hmm.
point of being a malignant narcissist where, hey, I've got your best interest, but I am going to destroy our own country.
Right.
I am
Mm-hmm.
going to remove, laws, and I am going to be the only one who can serve in this position. And the destructive quality of the
Mm-hmm.
malignant narcissist, the more power they have,
Mm-hmm.
the more destruction that they can cause. And in the book, I refer to it as leaving a scorched earth.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
it is really disturbing, because they may present as, I'm doing this for you, when
Mm-hmm.
in reality, it's all in their ends of what their goals are, what their needs are. And if that ever stops coming to them, or it's not provided anymore,
Mm-hmm.
they're at risk of exacting revenge and vengeance on everything, because
Mm-hmm.
they really don't think, care, or have regard for
Mm-hmm.
others.
Would you also say that, with malignant narcissist, they are the most dangerous in terms of domestic violence, like
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
physical harm? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Most narcissists will not do things necessarily to get arrested, because
Mm-hmm.
they can't deal with the I'm guilty.
Mm-hmm.
The malignant narcissist loses control on that and could care less. It is to destroy as many. They will ruin careers. They will throw people
Mm-hmm.
under the bus. And it doesn't matter whether it's a stranger that they've been in
Mm-hmm.
business relationship with, I shouldn't say a stranger, but someone they've been in business with,
Mm-hmm.
or a family member, a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
If you no longer serve the narcissist needs,
Mm-hmm.
they are more than willing to ruin you, hurt you, bring everything against you, whether it's legal issues against you.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working with some high conflict couples over the years,
Mm-hmm.
and there's an old adage: when would that ever kind of get resolved? Their high conflict, and I always say, well, as long as one of the two hates their ex more than they love their kids, it'll never
Mm-hmm.
stop.
Right.
They can be remarried, starting new families. The malignant narcissist harbors such resentment that every day of their life, what can I do to make
Mm-hmm.
my ex's life miserable?
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think too, this is one where, I tell people, and you're kind of hinting at it, is there's no valve of empathy or,
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I think it is the most dangerous, because there's no, oh, my partner is now hurting. I need to reach out with an empathetic response. None of that. And I do think that's why, you were
Yeah.
saying this one can lead more towards, you know, being a sociopath, or
Mm-hmm.
there's
Yeah.
just
That
not that. And they find a way to even justify, well, I only did this because you did this thing.
right. It
And
always,
hmm
as I always say, there is no excuse for bad behavior.
hmm
There's none. There's a word that we here in the States kind of changed the definition a bit, but it's Schadenfreude. And Schadenfreude is a word, a German word that we have changed the definition slightly to mean someone who derives pleasure from someone
hmm
else's suffering.
hmm hmm
And so it actually makes them feel good.
Right.
In society, a healthy person will, if they want to improve themselves, will set, work, and achieve a goal, and they feel good. Hey, look at
hmm
that! I was able to do that. Cool. The problem is in society, when they set and work and achieve a goal, to the narcissist, they now are becoming more aware of their own inferiorities.
hmm
So the bully, have to publicly put down the
hmm
person who has achieved. I mean, this person's success has nothing about this person. They're just personalizing.
Right.
And so the narcissist isn't setting and working, achieving for their own right. They're actually just trying to, in a hierarchical presentation in a public forum or in private at home, trying to put the other one down. And they get unbelievable pleasure from
hmm
knowing that they have the power to affect somebody else. That feeds
hmm
their ego.
hmm Yes. Yeah, it's just, it's so fascinating. I don't know if that's the right word, but just the way in which their minds work.
Mm-hmm.
And to see it, because it doesn't, like, for me, and even for like their partners, it's like, to not have empathy. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
where it just doesn't compute.
Yeah, we
you know.
don't have a visual. Like, it would be nice if they carried around one of those placards, that,
hmm
the olden days where it would just kind of say, I'm a narcissist, I will take advantage of you. Or,
Right.
if they put on a mask and actually kind of go, ooh,
Right. hmm
warning, stay away from this individual.
hmm
They look like you and I.
Right.
The issue is that at an early point in their life, they had not developed a sane, healthy sense of self.
hmm
And by virtue of that, they were always compensating for this sense of inferiority. It's always this grandiose presentation. I had a friend, I remember, he would lie on the most inane things, like, hey, what'd you have for breakfast? And I had breakfast with him at a sleepover. We were all hanging out
hmm
and we had pancakes. And he would say he had pheasant under glass. Like, what are you
What?
talking about? Why? Something so trivial as that? And
Right.
his entire life was, how do I answer so I can impress you? And I
hmm
just want to do that. So with the narcissist, they do this because they've been practicing it
hmm
and they've gotten very good at it. And I oftentimes will say to individuals, Sometimes the best thing to do when you're in a dysfunctional relationship is not be in it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. I think though, so to kind of switch into the part two of your book, I do think when you're in it, it's hard to get out of it.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
some of that has to do with what you identify in the book as like codependency and
Mm.
having low self-worth and self-blame.
Yeah.
And then that hope of, oh, well, if I just, and victims of domestic violence also do this. If I only change my behavior, then the
Yeah.
abuse will stop. When it's not about you, it's about the person that's being abused or abusive. And the same
Yeah.
with narcissism. So, let's talk about
Okay.
if you're in one of these relationships or if you've just gotten out, you know, what do you need to know in order to start helping yourself and healing?
Yeah. I would highly recommend that there are lots of resources, first off, out there.
Hmm.
There are lots of books. There are lots of support groups actually online nowadays.
Yes. Hmm.
Fantastic amount of, if you're trying to have no contact, how do you actually live outside of the relationship? You can
Hmm.
get a lot of support. So I'd be saying, first off, be patient and go slow.
Hmm.
Um, your desire to have a loving relationship is still a statement of you. And so you have this tendency of possibly being at risk when the narcissist reaches back out because of their needs. You
Hmm.
believe they might have made some changes.
Yep.
They
Hmm.
haven't. You might believe that, well, if I give them a second chance or a third chance or a 10th chance. And by the way, gender wise, the research shows that 75% of narcissists are males, 25% are females. Please don't mistake what I'm saying if you hear me using a certain pronoun on this. Women can be narcissists and they can wreak havoc on your life too. But the
Hmm.
majority of them by diagnosis are males. And so we
Hmm.
hear that referenced. So it's important to realize if you are the victim of a narcissist, if you're in a relationship trying to get out, or if you're out of one and trying to move forward, enter in some supportive networking, some
Hmm.
therapy, get some counseling, take a look at yourself, be reflective, understand not what is it about the other person, what is
Hmm.
it about me? What was it
Right.
that blinded me? What was it that was an unresolved issue for me? And so the word that you used a little earlier was codependent.
Hmm.
And I have a chapter specifically just on codependency. And I
Hmm.
like to use this phrase. And so for your listening and viewing audience, I'm going to say this comment. When I'm done, you're going to say, huh? And then I can break it down into some of the details.
Okay.
And that is, if I am when I'm with and I'm not, then I don't.
Hmm.
So if I am,
Hmm.
and I did a graphical on how that actually
Yeah,
plays
it's
out.
really clearly pictured in the book. Just, you know.
Thank you. So if I only have worth, value, if I only am complete, if I am only when I am with having an external validation, someone who now completes me, and that's the only way I can have that sense of completeness. If I am only when I am with, and I am not
Hmm.
getting that external validation, I'm
Hmm.
not in a relationship, then I don't have worth. I have no value. And that is a belief that has been developed since childhood for most individuals.
Hmm.
And as they go through life, it almost doesn't even matter who this is.
Hmm.
All they need is just someone. And the sharks in society are swimming and looking for this vulnerable individual
Right.
who's desperately trying to fill their void by having an external. So the individual with codependency may be at risk of being taken advantage of. And if in fact you've been in a number of these relationships, like I tend to say, one bad situation is truly unfortunate. Two is kind of an odd coincidence at this point.
Hmm.
Three, I'm like, what's wrong with your picker?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it speaks to the individual. And as you start to move forward, you really have to take a look at what are my own individual issues that I want to
Hmm.
work on. And there's
Hmm.
a variety of therapeutic recommendations I have through the entire second half of the book that I would be
Yes.
saying, hey, in therapy, this is what I want you to work on. So I put them in the book. And if you read the book and you do these things, if I never see you, great, have a good life. That's what this is about.
No, I think, but in the book, I think it's a great guide. And I just would want to add, it's, as you self-explore, it's not to self-blame,
Oh, good
but
point.
it's to learn. Part of healing is to look at this through the lens of, what do I need to learn from my past in order to help me now and into the future. But also I talk a lot about self-compassion.
Beautiful.
Part of healing is to remember to be kind to yourself, because it's easy to get caught up into the blame of. And then sometimes, like when you blame yourself, that can often, when that narcissist comes calling again, you tend to go right back because you don't want to keep hurting.
Yeah.
And so I think that's
lovely.
important.
By the way, and we can keep rolling for a while, and I love this. It's all good. There are the three most psychobabble phrases that I use in the book during the healing section. And we've chatted about this previously, is the idea of ego strength, ego boundary, and ego differentiation. When most people in society hear ego, they think big-headed, grandiose. This is different in psychological terms. Ego means identity. So ego or identity strength, identity boundary, identity differentiation. And I have enjoyed breaking these into three different parts from a therapeutic point of view. I have to get to know who I am. And so during our adolescence, we ask ourselves, who am I? And, am I a hardworking person? Am I a faith-based person? Am I a truth seeker? Am I a loyal friend? Who am I? I'm developing this identity. And we develop it through life. And what we're supposed to do is develop these core values of what my morals are, my values, my standards, who I am, turns from a question, who am I, to a statement of who I am. And the more you do of that, the strength, they call it, it's kind of like your own superpower, truly figuring out who you are. There's nothing bad or wrong about it. You want to really develop this. Once you understand that, it's because everything you think, feel, say, and do makes sense to you. You know where you end and the other begins. So this is ego boundaries. I am not them and they are not me. It's not a semi-permeable membrane. So if it's like I say my favorite food is shrimp, and they say their favorite food is chocolate cake. That doesn't make shrimp wrong. It doesn't make cake right. It just means we have differences of looking at this. And this is where I end and you begin. So that is another extension of the superpower. And I tried to figure out, how can I show this ego boundary? And I came out with this gingerbread silhouette.
I was just going to say the gingerbread man is in your book.
So every time, you write all your ego strength statements on the inside. This is who you are. But every time you do that, you draw another line around the outside of this figure. And that is greater power of who you are and where you end. And then the third part is ego differentiation. And that is that everything someone else thinks, feels, says, and does is a statement of them. The more ego strength I have, knowing where I end and you begin, and I understand that your behavior is a reflection of you, that you're projecting onto me, I don't have to personalize your accusations if they don't fit. You look like you were going to open something up there.
No, I just was going to show people the gingerbread man.
Oh, look at that. How cute.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, how do I graphically depict that? It's your exterior boundary. So the curious aspect, for all too long, an individual in a relationship of this type has oftentimes personalized. So if someone calls me a short, fat hippopotamus, I'm not short, I'm 6'2". Fat, I could probably afford to lose a couple of pounds, but I'm not fat. And a pachyderm? No, I don't think so. So I don't have to personalize those comments. As a matter of fact, you saying them is a statement that you think it's okay to belittle, to name call, to be rude, to be offensive maybe to the person you're in a relationship with. That's not a statement of me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a statement of that individual. And so
Right.
that helps in your recovery. Um, Another thing that a lot of individuals who present in therapy from these relationships will oftentimes point out, and I'll ask them, when did you become aware
Mm-hmm.
of these issues? And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, kind of early.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, hey, if I just stick around, I'll help them become a better
Mm-hmm.
person. Every once in a while, they show these glimmers of what they could be, their potential. And so I
Mm-hmm.
fall in love with their potential. We'll never do that.
Yeah, the
Um,
idea of
well, so the again, that's a statement of you, not a
right.
statement of that person. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that in recovery you have to be able to be aware of, I have my own standards, my ego strength, and that I have to learn not to necessarily minimize other people's behaviors. Just
Mm-hmm.
because I may not do it doesn't mean someone else wouldn't do it. And so I would go, well, I wouldn't do that. So, all
Mm-hmm.
right. So if you want to give someone a chance, fine. It's not a problem, but you need to be aware of it. You just can't keep minimizing.
Right.
I always
Mm-hmm.
say that if you have to be making excuses for the other person, you're with the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes. Or if you have to compromise who you are just to be in a
yep.
relationship, those
Oh my
are
gosh.
warning signs. And even in the book, you talk about boundaries and non-negotiables. Know what
Yes.
they are.
Yeah, for each one of us, there are things that we want to make a
Mm-hmm.
healthy relationship, and those can be non-negotiable. So they can be positive things. I want someone
Mm-hmm.
who's loving and kind and has a win-win philosophy and emotionally
Mm-hmm.
stable, is committed to family, has good relationships with their friends. All these kind of factors that are
Mm-hmm.
positive. This is what I'm looking for. In addition, you may want some non-negotiables that are negatives.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's physically assaultive, that's it. If
Mm-hmm.
someone is cruel and belittling, if someone is constantly putting you in a bad situation, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe kind of making fun of you in a public forum,
Mm-hmm.
to make themselves feel better. So you have to know what your non-negotiables are. There are also negotiables, like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a night owl, and my partner is a early riser. Okay, we can live with that.
Mm-hmm.
So there are negotiables, but there are non-negotiables. And
Right.
so I encourage people to come up with a list of non-negotiables.
Mm-hmm.
If you have self-worth, and that's what you want to develop with that ego strength, knowing
Mm-hmm.
who I am, then I have the ability to speak up and set a boundary and say, this non-negotiable negative is unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
If you engage in this, I would prefer not to continue in the relationship. I don't have to try to fix you. I
Right.
didn't I didn't create your ghost. I can't cure your ghost. So I have to
Mm-hmm.
figure out how I'm going to cope with this. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where feeling better about me, being able to set a boundary and understanding their behaviors are statements of them, not me.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Knowing who you are, knowing what's okay and what's not okay is important, just in general in life, but
Yes.
also when you're in the beginning stages of relationships,
Yeah.
or even thinking about um, dating again, or
Mm-hmm.
any of that. And I
Yeah.
know this isn't specific just to romantic relationships, but
Mm-hmm.
I do think I feel like, even if, to whoever's listening to watching this,
Mm-hmm.
even if you feel like, oh, maybe I've never been in a narcissistic relationship, I think it's just great information. And then,
Mm-hmm.
especially the second part of the book, knowing yourself, is just a wonderful book.
Yes.
And then the
Thank
little
you.
exercises, do the exercises, people.
Yeah, as we said before we started to record, one of the things that I always love with writing books is our profession's been around for over 100 years, and most of
Hmm.
our books are academic textbooks written for our colleagues. When
Hmm.
in fact, reality, this great information that's evidence based, research based, needs to be shared with the general public. So I try to write in a way that's easily consumable for everybody in
Hmm.
society. And so when you read, it's passive acquisition of information. But
Hmm.
with the exercises in the book, it becomes an active exercise where you get to personalize and see how it applies to you. And that's what I
Hmm.
really hope people will be able to do with the book.
Yes, it's an excellent book. I really
Thank you.
highly recommend it. I really appreciate you being on the show today and talking about narcissism and your book.
It has been my honor, my pleasure. I hope those listeners out there can benefit from our
Mhm.
conversation today. Thank you.
And how do we I'm going to put links to your book
Okay.
on the YouTube and on my social media, but how do people find you, Dr. Shinitzky?
Well, to find me, you would need to be able to go to my website, which is drshinitzky.com, which is really easy to spell. It's DRSHINITZKY.com. That's my
Mhm.
website. And if you go to Amazon and just type in Shinitzky, you'll come up with the range of books that I have written.
Yes. And like I said, I will also put them on the comment sections of the
Thank you.
YouTube channel and the social media page.
This has been a delight. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.